Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Around the Nation right here, TYT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. Got a great show for you guys today. That's why we're a few minutes late. But nonetheless, got great stories, so it's going to be a fantastic show. We have John Kelly real quick. We have the Stormy Daniels story, a little bit on that, and a little bit of a curious defense on Donald Trump when it comes to that. Interesting. We've got steelworkers, talk about American jobs. Rex Tillerson, of course, and then a very interesting story on the case going on with Larry Nassar. If you're not familiar, he is the former gymnast doctor that was accused and actually convicted of sexual assault. So that case is going on in Michigan, so I want to talk about that. Very interesting. And how the judge, well, we'll talk about that. And then if we can get to it, warrantless wiretapping is a very important story as well. So a lot of fun stuff here and some very interesting and important stuff as well. So I want to thank everybody for watching so far. Please like and share the stream if you can. So that helps out a lot. All right. Anyway. I've wasted enough time. Let's go. Let's do this. You know what? I was almost tempted to scream out Leroy, Leroy Jenkins. Here we go. Anyway, I hope some of you, or most of you, get that reference because it's awesome. All right. Anyway. So Chief of Staff John Kelly is billed as one of the adults in the room around Donald Trump. Now, this is one of the guys who ensures that Donald Trump, at the very least, does not accidentally blow up the world. Okay, good to have an adult in the room. Now, I've got a lot of problems with John Kelly, his views on, for example, immigrants and all that. He's not a good guy, okay? But nonetheless, he has made sure that the president hasn't actually nuked anyone so far, so I guess that's good. You take the good with the bad, I guess, right? Now, the rest of the media refers to John Kelly in much the same way that I just did. Now, that could end up actually being a little problematic, as the president has a very thin skin and doesn't like the idea that someone else around him might actually be smarter, might actually know more than he does, because the president's like, I'm the smartest person ever. What do I need experts for? I know more than all the other experts. I'm the best. I'm the greatest. I'm the smartest. Oh, look at my score. I got a 30 out of 30 on this recent test. You realize that test is actually testing for dementia and Alzheimer's. Hey, congratulations. You don't have early onset dementia or Alzheimer's. Wonderful, but that does not mean that you're smart. Anyway, but of course he's going to brag about that. Now, this whole thing with John Kelly brings us to Axios' Jonathan Swan. Now, he recently spoke to a source close to the president about a recent interview that John Kelly had. This is with Bret Baier. Now, in it, the source predicted that Donald Trump would be very, very angry at what his chief of staff had said. And I'm going to tell you that, I'm going to tell you if that ends up being true, but first I want to show you the video. Let's take a look. Hold on, I do not have the video ready for some reason.
As we talked about things, where this president is and how much he wants to deal with this DACA issue and take it away, I told him that, there's been an evolutionary process that this president has gone through as a campaign, and I pointed out to all of the members that were in the room that they all say things during the course of campaigns that may or may not be fully informed. But this president, if you've seen what he's done, he has changed the way he's looked at a number of things. He's adjusted the way he's looked at the South Asia strategy, Afghanistan. He's very definitely changed his attitude towards the DACA issue, and even the wall. Once we briefed him when I was at DHS and told him that the real experts on defending the southwest border, the Customs and Border Protection men and women came in, did a survey of the border. There are places where hydrographically, geographically, a wall would not be realistic. There are other parts of the southwest border that are so wild and untamed that there is no traffic that goes through them. There's other places, we think about 800 miles additional wall to include the 600 that are already in place. The fencing would suffice. So he has evolved in the way he's looked at things. Campaign to governing are two different things, and this president is very, very, very flexible in terms of what is within the realm of the possible.
All right, so that's Kelly. Now, obviously, Donald Trump watches a lot of Fox News. He's watched about 68 hours of television a day and has special executive time where he eats McDonald's in bed and watches Fox and Friends. But this is Brett Baer's show. But again, with Trump, he watches when his surrogates go on TV. And of course, John Kelly is representative of the Trump administration. So he saw this, right? Now, to normal people, I think that makes a lot of sense, what he said. Campaign and governing. Hey, look, sometimes when you're, or all the time, when you're running a political campaign, you promise certain things that aren't really easy to get done. Normal people understand that. But again, Donald Trump, look, we're not dealing with a normal person when we're dealing with Donald Trump. So Jonathan Swan writes this. He said, late last night, after a few hours after Fox News aired Brett Baer's interview with John Kelly, a source close to the president told me that Trump would explode when he saw what his chief of staff said. The source, who had spent a lot of time with Trump, predicted the president would hate the interview because Kelly came off as a mature professional who patiently educated, and this is important, who patiently educated an uninformed Trump and helped him see the light and evolve on the wall. All right. So when dealing with somebody like Donald Trump, there's a couple of rules, right? Well, rule number one, don't make Trump sound or look stupid. So when you say he was uninformed on an issue, well, that immediately takes away from Trump's assertions that he is the smartest person in the room. So when you say, no, well, I had to go and talk to him, I had to have the experts talk to him, because he may or may not have been not as well informed on the issue. Red flag. Red flag. Not good. Not only that, but of course, when he has a position, you don't speak for him and say that you have evolved on this issue, right? You don't do that, okay? Now, of course, hours later, President Trump comes out and he says on Twitter, and this is a direct rebuke of what John Kelly had just said. He said, the wall is the wall. It has never changed or evolved from the first day I conceived of it. Parts will be of necessity see-through, a transparent wall. You should get working on that transparent aluminum. I think we already actually have it now. And it was never intended to be built in areas where there is natural protection such as mountains, wastelands, or tough rivers or water. No, that's not what he said. In fact, he was incredibly vague about the wall. He said, big, beautiful wall all along our southern border. He said, I will build a great wall, and nobody builds walls better than me. Believe me. And then I'll build them very inexpensively. I will build a great, great wall on our southern border, and I will make Mexico pay for that wall. Mark my words. Now, the part of the interview that we didn't get to, that was right after Kelly had stopped talking, Brett Baer asked him, he said, so is Mexico going to pay for the wall? And they're like, nope. Well, that's an evolution, right? That's not true. Because, originally, again, he said Mexico's going to pay for the wall. Mexico ain't paying for the wall. And so they've slowly dropped that. So he's not saying Mexico's going to pay for the wall. That's an evolution. So yes, Donald Trump has absolutely evolved from that position. But no, he comes back and says, no, I didn't evolve at all. It's been the same the whole time. He's a pathological liar, right? What's funny is if Mexico is going to pay for the wall, then why is he demanding for example, any DACA deal provide funding for the wall that Mexico is going to pay for? Again, so many inconsistencies, right? But he wasn't really all that specific on the wall, to be fair, right? It was very vague, so we didn't know what it looked like. He didn't even know what it looked like. All he was doing is saying, look, hey, wall, right? And then all of his supporters, the people in the audience who have no empathy for other people and who are extremely scared of brown people, are like, yeah, wall. So, to be fair, again, they fell for something that was never going to happen. It's incredibly vague. Okay. Now, Swan also writes, and this is important. This is one of the first public signs we've seen of tension between Trump and his chief of staff. Last night, Kelly undercut Trump's self-perception as the most brilliant man on earth, an instant master of all subjects. The notion of evolution would be inherently offensive to him. And here's what the president's source had told Swan. Quote, Kelly has finally ventured into Steve Bannon territory when it comes to trying to create the perception that he's a great manipulator. Saving the country from Trump's ignorance. The difference is Steve tried to develop that reputation in off-the-record interviews and conversations with reporters. Kelly did it openly in the country's most watched cable network. It's the subtle difference between hubris and arrogance. Now, if that source is right, then John Kelly, he went too far. Now, let's go to Raw Story. Since this happened before, new reporting from Raw Story says that, and this is actually based on a Washington Post story, says that Donald Trump is now furious with John Kelly. Let's see. The president was reportedly needled by the tone Kelly took during a Fox News interview when he asked about the remarks. Trump's associates said the president was furious with Kelly both for what he said and the tone he used, which Trump thought made it appear he was a child who had to be managed. The word uninformed particularly rankled the president, who was commonly known to think of himself as a genius. Not only that, but they go to a quote from a longtime friend, Christopher Ruddy. Now, this is the Newsmax CEO. This isn't some liberal source. This is Donald Trump's friend, right? Now, he told the Post that Trump's rage towards Kelly was because he felt the retired general was speaking out of turn on an issue that was very dear to the president's base, immigration. So, not good, man. Look, we know from past stories that Trump and Kelly have had some differences, right? However, since Kelly is still there, there's a chance that Kelly has picked up on ways in order to kiss Trump's ass. Now, nonetheless, with that perception out there, and that the president is now aware of that perception, that Kelly is the adult in the room and that he's the smart one that's informing a not-so-smart Donald Trump, if that perception continues, then this working relationship that they have in the White House, I think, in my opinion, will slowly degrade. And for that, I go to, look, they say that John Kelly has ventured into Bannon territory. Well, look at Bannon. He's the best example of this, right? I never would have thought that Bannon would have not only been fired, right, but thrown under the bus so hard by Trump, thanks to the quotes in Fire and Fury, right? I mean, and not only that, but Bannon himself got stripped of his platform by Breitbart, or on Breitbart, thanks to Donald Trump. So, look, man, no matter how close you may seem to the president, there is a good chance that you say one or two wrong things, you're done. With this president, anything can happen. Okay. Let's move on. Let's see, what do I want to go to next? Let's go to Rex Tillerson. It's another fun story here. All right. So, look, I can imagine that working with Donald Trump isn't exactly the easiest thing to do, especially if you're, number one, a career politician, or number two, a businessman, or number three, anybody who likes to have things like a sort of a normal type of workplace, right? Well, from what we know about the White House, it's not exactly a normal place to work. Now, one example is Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, who has had to basically adapt himself to work within the Trump White House. Now, one example of that is the fact, and this is reported by Raw Story. Again, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson says that he prints out Trump tweets and uses them to inform decision-making on policy, and specifically foreign policy, which is a disastrous idea. Now, speaking to his predecessor, Condoleezza Rice, at Stanford University event on Wednesday, at which he said the president is, quote, world-class at social media, on which he reaches millions of people via Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook with messages that sometimes his own team remain unaware of. So look, you want to say that Donald Trump has a huge social media following? Yeah, that's true, even though probably a lot of them are admittedly bots that you can buy. Yes, you can buy followers on Twitter. No, I have not done so, or else I would have actually a lot more followers than I do now. And you can follow me on Twitter right down there. Anyway, now, Tillerson said the challenge is getting caught up because I don't even have a Twitter account that I can follow what he's tweeting. So my staff usually has to print his tweets out and hand them to me. Now, that's interesting because why should having a Twitter account be a prerequisite for working with Trump? I know it's technically not, but he just said, hey, look, man, since I don't have a Twitter account, I can't really keep up with what he's saying. And the policy positions that he's taking on things that, of course, later on he switches. Now, to show you how much of a time lag there is, since he does not have a Twitter and since he does not follow the president, and since the president doesn't actually talk to them about policy before firing off a tweet, he says it might be 5 minutes or it might be an hour before somebody hands me a piece of paper and says, hey, the president tweeted this out. It allows me now to think about, is it a foreign policy issue? And how do we take that and now use it? So understand, right? Trump, who tends to consistently contradict himself on Twitter, is now sometimes having his nonsensical tweets be used in policymaking decisions. They literally have to print it out and say, okay, what does he mean by this? Like, covfefe. What the fuck is covfefe? Now I can imagine them actually having that conversation. Or, okay, so based on his last Rocket Man tweet, what do we think he wants to do with North Korea? Just imagine being in that position to have to go and parse out what Donald Trump's tweets actually mean. It's insanity. And the most messed up part of this is that, again, they have to guess what he wants because they won't, he doesn't tell his staff. He just goes off half-cocked on Twitter at 3 a.m. And look, I've seen stories before that, once 6 o'clock rolls around, they can't control him anymore. Once he goes upstairs, that's it. The brakes are off. The Twitter is activated, and he is out there, and he is, number one, he's speaking as the president of the United States on Twitter, so he's representing the entire country with these insane tweets fired off at weird hours of the night. This is insane, right? This is completely abnormal. Super nuts. Now, Tillerson also says that he believes, and this is funny and sad, that this is the best way of dealing with Trump's style of public communication and diplomacy, because they've tried everything else. They tried sitting him down and talking about things in briefings. Well, he has no attention span, right? He gets bored very, very easily. So first they tried to do the briefings, shorter briefings, right? Things like, half a page with killer maps and graphics, and, they put his name into the middle of it. That didn't work. They shrunk it down to tweet size and put his name in it. That still didn't quite work. So, and now we know that he's having actually less briefings and less meetings throughout the day. And he's actually working far less than he was before. Again, he's got executive time in the mornings where he watches Fox and Friends and then tweets out things that mirror exactly what was said on Fox and Friends. And then he calls his buddies and talks to them about things. Like, if you want to talk about who was the leaker, it was him. By calling his friends and talking about these things, these friends would go and talk to the press. So he's the White House leaker. It's amazing, right? But anyway, Tillerson, he continues, right? He says, now on the one hand, you could say, well, that's nuts. Yes, 100%. If you just left it there, I would have agreed with you 100%. But this is about him not having a Twitter account. He says, why don't you get an account? But on the other hand, I've actually concluded that that's not a bad system because it goes out and I don't know it's going to go out. So there's not a whole lot I'm going to do until it's out there. Talking about the tweets. So look, this is somebody who's pretty much given up. He knows President Trump, you can't control him, right? He's going to tweet out random things while, you know, and what Tillerson is going to do, he's just going to sit there and he's going to wait for it, right? And then when he sees about something about Kim Jong-un being tweeted out or something about the UN, then he's going to take that, or his staff is going to take that, print it out, and then they're going to have to go and and decipher it. What the hell kind of White House runs like this? This is unbelievable. Except that it is completely believable because we have taken the abnormal and turned it into the normal. And I know, I have fallen into that trap as of late. Things that are completely insane. Now I read the story, and I read this story, for example, and I'm like, well, of course, that makes sense. And then you think about it for a couple of seconds, and you're like, wait a minute. No, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense at all. That's not normal. This is not how a country is supposed to run. Like, there's no competence here. This is insane. This is absolutely insane. This is not what smart people, very, very smart people, or stable geniuses do. Okay? But again, while it's not normal, it looks like we've all adjusted to it. For example, Tillerson, he says that he has taken time for himself, that it has taken time for himself and the president's staff to become accustomed to the Twitter activity. Again, they're not putting a stop to it at all. He said it was very unconventional for all of us, but he says that he realizes that it's just his way of wanting to communicate on the subject. So instead of walking, I don't know how far it is, right? But instead of getting your fat ass up off the bed, away from your 3 TVs, watching Fox News and CNN and the stuff that you claim to not watch because you hate, instead of getting up off of there and actually going and talking to your staff and going to meetings and actually doing your job, no, it's just easier to tweet out random nonsense and ridiculous bullshit positions that make no sense in the real world. And by the way, a lot of these tweets, again, they're all about making fun of somebody or picking a fight with, again, North Korea. Rocket Man. I got to make fun of Kim Jong-un. Got to make fun of Rocket Man. Look, this just shows that they've given up. They have tailored themselves around Trump, and they have decided that, you know what, we're going to make this normal. Okay. Look, this is not the way to craft policy. And I'm actually really worried, not just about Trump. Like, yes, Trump is Trump, right? What's going to have to happen afterwards? What's the long-term effect on our system going to be after Trump is gone? Will there ever be a normal? Or is crazy the new normal? And that's a conversation that I hope, we won't have to have in the future, because I hope things actually do get back to some sort of normal. Oh. Moving on. We're going to go with steelworkers. So Donald Trump, during his presidential campaign, he promised to protect American jobs. That's good, right? I would be in favor of that because I'm in favor of people having jobs. Now, he did promise to protect jobs in both coal and in steel, right? Now, he also promised to save a lot of jobs, for example, in Carrier, right? Now, how's that worked out? Well, I'm going to look at this objectively, right? And I want to show you how well he actually did. Now, Carrier, recently, there was some bad news for a lot of Carrier workers. They actually laid off hundreds of workers recently and are now moving a production line to Mexico. Now remember, Carrier is the company that got a $7 million special break in order to keep jobs in America. That was something that Donald Trump was incredibly proud of, right? And look, when that happened, I wanted to give him credit. But at the same time, I'm like, boy, that $7 million deal, well, that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money we're throwing at a corporation and to try to entice them into keeping jobs there. Well, what's going to prevent them from going and holding these jobs for ransom now? And I think that was a good question. So nonetheless, okay, their jobs were temporarily saved. And then guess what? They ended up laying off more. And again, they're moving these workers or these jobs to Mexico. And there's a lot of people that are going to end up losing their jobs, which is terrible. Okay, so Carrier didn't work out. What about coal, right? Donald Trump wanted to save the coal industry. Well, last year, coal created about 500 jobs total. Now, Scott Pruitt came out recently and said, oh, no, you don't understand. Coal, we saved about 50,000 coal jobs. No, that's actually not what happened. 50,000 is actually how many coal workers are left in America. So no, he didn't save 50,000 coal jobs. That's how many coal jobs exist. The number is actually about 500 that were created. Now, that's something, right? But wait, that's actually not, because according to a new article by CNN, they've reported that a coal mine near Pennsylvania-West Virginia border is now due to close, which would eliminate a total of 370 jobs. So of those jobs that they created, 370 are going away. And look, that actually sucks, especially for the workers, right? Now, I empathize with the workers. These are people that actually believe that Donald Trump could bring back coal. Now, unfortunately for them, market forces, and this is not overregulation because Donald Trump removed a lot of the regulations that President Obama had put into place, and nonetheless, they are still shedding jobs because, again, it's not overregulation, it's market forces. Coal is just too expensive compared to natural gas. And so, of course, the jobs are going to natural gas. No matter how much you try to prop up the coal industry, it's not going to go anywhere. And again, that's sad for a lot of these workers, right, who are actually hoping that Donald Trump would be able to keep his promise to keep these coal jobs open. So coal, not doing very well. Carrier is laying people off, and they're going to Mexico. So what about steel, right? Now, there's a problem as well. While I don't have job numbers on steel, I do know that steel and steelwork has actually been down. It actually hasn't gotten better. And the problem is that you have a problem with dumping, right? So one of the big issues with steel prices is that China can make steel far cheaper than America. And then what they do is that they'll just dump the steel, right? That causes a huge, steep decline in the prices of steel, which makes American steel workers and steel companies unable to compete with China. So that's a big, big problem, right? That puts American steel workers out of work. President Trump promised to bring those steel jobs back. Now, one of the ways that he wanted to do that was look into that practice, right? Do an investigation that would come up with solutions by the summer of 2017, and also put diplomatic pressure on China. Now, did any of those things happen? No, unfortunately, they did not. The summer obviously has come and gone, and there is no results from any of that investigation, nor is there any pressure on China. In fact, Donald Trump has loosened pressure on China in order to help entice them to deal with North Korea, which I think actually is a smart action, right? But you're not exactly able to put pressure on China if you're also being soft on China in order to have a diplomatic goal. which again, I agree with because nobody wins in a war with North Korea. And if China can put enough pressure on North Korea to tamp down on their nuclear weapons, then that's great. Then that would be a win overall. But I'm saying from the steelworkers' perspective, they have not received a win. And of course, again, they're understandably upset. In fact, in an interview with CNN, United Steelworkers President Leo Gerard said that American workers are now, in some ways, worse off than they were a year ago. He said, "We're terribly disappointed and hugely frustrated. There's been no action that has done anything to protect and defend American jobs. In some cases, we are worse off now than we were then." So, look, this is not an easy problem to take on. This is actually a very nuanced problem, right? So, for one, if you end up increasing tariffs on China, then you could risk going into a trade war with the Chinese. That could have some unintended consequences for our economy, and I'm not necessarily sure if those consequences will be good or bad, considering how much of a trade or how much trade we actually do with China. So, okay. But that is one direction that you could go, right? On that, have we seen any sort of indication that we're going to go that way? Well, Steve Bannon was actually a big proponent of entering a trade war with China. Donald Trump doesn't seem very interested in doing so. In fact, I don't necessarily believe that Trump cares about crafting a nuanced policy position that would, A, help steelworkers, and B, make it so that we don't necessarily get into what could be a disastrous trade war with China. Okay, so again, what do we do with this situation? Not entirely sure, right? And what is Trump going to do with this situation? Again, I'm not entirely sure. I don't think he's smart enough to do anything. I mean, the guy can barely pay attention enough to read anything that's bigger than a tweet. So what he has done, though, is that his positions are deregulate everything and do giant tax cuts. Well, for one, going back to coal, he's deregulated coal, right? Even with all that, and trying to prop up the coal industry, which failed, there was actually a 5-person panel appointed by Donald Trump to try and prop up the coal industry. That didn't work. It actually got rejected. So he couldn't prop up the coal industry. But nonetheless, he has tried to, in other areas, and successfully has deregulated a lot of rules around the coal industry, and also generally given giant tax cuts to corporations. Now, in return for those giant tax cuts, some of these companies have given out some bonuses, but of course, there's some strings attached to that one. There's some caveats on that. For one, they're only for qualified employees. For example, the $1,000 bonuses that Walmart was giving out was only for people who had been there for 20 years. So the majority of those people receiving those $1,000 bonuses is actually very small. Not only that, but they've shed a lot of jobs and are basically using that money not to create jobs, not to raise wages overall, but mostly to do more stock buybacks, which inflates shareholder profit. So what Donald Trump has done economically is basically given corporations everything that they've ever wanted, but with no strings. No promises of job creation, just, hey, here you go. Let's make it rain. And he did that, I think, because he benefits from that. Not only does he save money, but he's also made some very rich CEOs very, very happy, and they are more likely now to support him. The problem with that is that it does not trickle down to the workers. And we've seen that over and over and over again. So, look, I'm sorry to say, but if you're a steel worker or if you're a coal miner and you voted for Donald Trump, then you've been conned. You have fallen for the snake oil. You have fallen for the con job. And it sucks, and I'm sorry to have to point that out to you, but the jobs that you were hoping for, the pay that you were hoping for, it's just not going to happen. Okay. Again, that's super sad. All right. So what I'm going to do, we're going to take a quick break here. We'll come back. We got plenty more stories here, including Stormy Daniels coming up next. So, and my curious defense of Donald Trump. So we'll be right back. Stay right here, and we'll be back in a minute. All right, welcome back around the nation right here. TWT Nation, if you haven't already, please give us a like and a share. Before I go on, I want to thank the patrons, patreon.com/TYT Nation. That's how you can support the show. I don't know if I should make like a segment out of this tomorrow, but I do want to talk about some of the YouTube policy changes that have completely screwed over small creators. So I think that's an important issue. I mean, like the YouTube demonetization stuff is already bad enough, right? But now it's gotten worse. They've completely screwed very small creators. Thankfully, I'm not quite in that category. But nonetheless, we're all seeing an effect from advertisers pulling out, thanks to, again, Logan Paul, who, again, so Logan Paul is top tier, right? I'm not saying his content is top tier, but his subscribers is top tier. His top tier advertising makes lots and lots of money, right? So he goes and pulls this stupid stunt and screws everybody else. The guy gets a slap on the wrist, and yet smaller creators, the smallest creators, get screwed over. And of course, when advertisers flee, everyone else also suffers. And that's exactly what happened. So we've had more advertisers flee. I've had a huge drop in revenue, which is already bad enough from the adpocalypse anyway. But I mean, it's always the gigantic creators that screw it for everyone else, that screw it up for everyone else. So that's what's going on. I think I probably will do a segment on it tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. But anyway, let's move on to more news. Let's move on to Stormy Daniels. Okay. So last week, it was revealed that Donald Trump had an alleged affair with a porn star. Now, during that, or I should say after that, as Trump was getting ready to run for election, his lawyer, it was revealed, had arranged a $130,000 payment in order to keep this information from coming out. Now, look, I didn't do the story originally when it came out because, look, I'm going to be honest and say that for the most part, I didn't care. I mean, Trump cheating on his wife, that's his business, right? And not only that, but the way, and this is information that came out as well, the way that he had sex, and that's definitely his business. I don't need to know about any of that. I'm not interested in any of that. Okay. So now there are a couple of things that are interesting and that might actually be substantial. And so that's what I want to talk about. And that is, number one, the hush money, right? And then there's the issue of Fox News that decided that they wanted to kill the story. This is before anyone else had knew. Okay, so let me give you some context. Let me run down what we know, right? So here you have a porn star with the name Stephanie Clifford, right? She's known as Stormy Daniels. And back in 2011, she talked about an alleged affair that she had with President Trump back in 2006 when he was running The Apprentice, right? Now, she said the encounter between Clifford and Trump took place in July at a Nevada golf tournament. The Wall Street Journal reported last week that Trump's longtime lawyer, Michael Cohen, had arranged a $130,000 payment to Clifford to prevent her from going public about the affair. So, again, that's a little bit of context here. Is anybody shocked? No. Yeah, of course Donald Trump has had affairs. You think this is the first one? No, of course not. There's plenty. That in itself is not exactly news. And I think as progressives, it's not something that as a whole we're concerned about because, look, we don't care what you do in your bedroom. I don't care what Donald Trump does in his bedroom. I don't care what he does with other women. I don't care what he does with Melania. I don't care. Right? So, look, I'm defending him because I don't want to know what it's like to have sex with him. I don't. And look, I think the country already has a little bit of an idea because we've been getting fucked every day and it hasn't been great, to be fair. Okay, but no. The interesting thing in here is aside from the money, who knew about it, right? And this is where it gets interesting. In October of 2016, sources tell CNN that Fox News reporter Diana Falzone brought her editors a story in which Daniels' manager confirmed the relationship between Trump and her client. Falzone also reportedly saw emails documenting the financial settlement to ensure that to ensure that she had never spoke about it ever again. So this is Fox News, right? Now, why would a Fox News reporter come up with this report? Well, it turns out that during the primary, Fox News actually wanted to pursue the story because I guess they didn't want somebody like President Trump or, Donald Trump, candidate Trump, becoming their nominee. So they're like, okay, go find dirt on Trump. See what we can do to push him out of the race. Well, once he became the nominee, that's when Fox decided that, hey, you know the story that we had you go and try to find the dirt that we tried to we wanted you to find? Yeah, never mind. We're not going to run it. Now, they said, of course, that, we just didn't have enough information. Really? Again, there were confirmed emails and then also a polygraph. Now, the significance of Fox killing the story, I think, is the part that can't be overstated, right? They killed the story that they believe would potentially hurt their candidate. I mean, look, if MSNBC killed a story about Obama having an affair, you know whose hair would be on fire? The right wing. But then again, look, progressives don't necessarily care about this stuff unless it shows off some hypocrisy. So, look, if MSNBC did report it, a lot of liberals would be like, oh, that's pretty shitty of them. But are we going to talk about some policy? Because what's President Obama actually doing on policy? And I think that's what's important. That's what progressives actually focus on. Now, the hypocrisy part, Obama never ran on being pro-family values, right? Obama never ran on being pro-regular marriage, right? So the comparison here is, let's look at Scott DesJarlais, for example. Okay. Scott DesJarlais is a Republican. He ran as somebody who's pro-life, pro-family. Okay, all that stuff, right? This is the guy who made his mistress get an abortion. Well, that's obvious hypocrisy, right? And to be fair, I don't know if Trump necessarily ran as, I'm pro-family, I'm pro-family. He's more of, I want to punish people who get abortions. Then again, he never made anybody get an abortion, so he didn't necessarily run as somebody who was a pro-family candidate. And nonetheless, you had a lot of evangelicals, most evangelicals, line up behind him. Most pro-life people lined up behind him. And that kind of shows you the tribalism that is inherent within the right wing that doesn't necessarily exist in the left wing, at least to some extent, right? I mean, Republicans will protect and vote for people like Roy Moore, for example, who was a child molester, right? Well, the left, in a lot of cases, might be a little too quick to throw their own under the bus, right? Especially without, for example, giving a hearing or getting the facts. And sometimes there are, false allegations and things like that. But I don't think that happens in the majority of cases, right? Nonetheless, what happens in the right wing is we don't care what you do. We're going to protect you because you're one of us. You've got an R next to your name. So that tribalism, again, it does exist in both sides, but I think the right tends to amplify that a lot more. So, and I think that's the big reason why Fox News decided, you know what, we're going to bury this story because it's going to hurt Trump and we can't do that because we are the official propaganda arm of the Republican Party. Now, there's one more thing here, right? Speaking of that tribalism, so if they had this affair, right? Now, if it was, proven 100%, would it have made a difference in the support of the president? Absolutely not. No. If the Hollywood Access tape showed us anything, is that no matter what they do, the candidate, the president's supporters will always stick with their candidate no matter what. They're going to stick with their guy. Okay. Now, one more quick thing the final thought that I want to leave you with here, right? That I thought was slightly interesting. Take it for what you will, but Daniels, in that 2011 interview, reportedly said that Trump had basically told her that, hey, you know what? You remind me of my daughter. Oof. This is somebody that allegedly he's having sex with. You remind me of my daughter. Take it as you will. And hopefully you don't get images in your head. Enjoy. Okay. Alrighty. So let's go to warrantless wiretapping. Speaking of tapping, right? Great segue. Awesome. Okay. All right. So recently, Congress, the House specifically, voted on a measure to give Donald Trump powers, incredible spying powers. This is Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. And the House, again, overwhelmingly voted to extend that. It was actually going to expire, I think, at the end of the month. And so I'm against the program, right? Because what they're doing in this program is basically they're using it to scoop up Americans' data. When it comes to phone records, for example, or emails and things like that, all this gets swept up by the NSA. So that's a huge, huge violation of privacy. It's actually a gross violation of the Fourth Amendment, right? Now, according to Wired, Section 702 was intended to allow intelligence officials to electronically surveil non-U.S. persons reasonably believed to be located outside the United States without a warrant. So this is what it's theoretically supposed to do, right? Now, the NSA would collect millions of video chats, instant messages, and emails under Section 702 because they can compel companies like Facebook, AT&T, and Google to hand over that information. Now, again, theoretically, it's supposed to be anybody located outside of the United States that was that they were believed to have been or be involved with terrorist activity, right? Intentions, of course, don't match to reality in this because the law also allows the FBI to search through the NSA's database, again, without a warrant. Now, this constitutes what critics like Senator Ron Wyden call a backdoor to the Fourth Amendment because these communications can all be scooped up en masse, and then without a warrant, they can just go and look at it. They can go and look at your information. They can see your texts. They can see your emails. They can hear your voice, your voice chats, all that stuff. So now the House, when they voted, to pass this bill. And again, they voted it overwhelmingly, including with the help of Democrats, Nancy Pelosi. So here's Nancy Pelosi saying, Donald Trump, even though we think that you're an unstable moron and that you're a Russian plant, here you go. Here's some unlimited spying powers. Take it. Take it and run with it. The hypocrisy about this, right? But not only that, but before they passed it, they shot down an amendment. Like, because again, if you're worried about Donald Trump being an authoritarian, which I believe that he is, a wannabe authoritarian, and somebody who would misuse the power that is given to him, and somebody who I think is very, very unfit for office, well, then you wouldn't want to hand him unlimited spying power. So, again, this amendment was put up by Ron Wyden that would have guaranteed privacy safeguards to the law. That includes the requirement that intelligence agents get a warrant in many cases before searching through emails and other digital communications belonging to U.S. citizens. Now remember, I keep saying that the whole purpose of the law is to look at people who are outside of the United States, drafted into the law, outside of the United States that might be affiliated with terrorist groups or might be terrorists themselves. U.S. citizens are not supposed to be surveilled without a warrant. So this amendment that was put in by Wyden, actually that was the Senate amendment, but nonetheless, okay. This amendment that was put in the House would have protected Americans' data. They shot it down completely. But look, if this was this bill was about protecting us from foreign terrorists, then why not pass the amendment to protect U.S. citizens, which specifically states they have to get a warrant? No, they didn't, because they don't care. They actually want to have our data. They want to take our data, and they want to use it. I think they want to use it against us, right? So to look up and to prevent any political dissent, that is the problem here, okay? And I know that sounds a little conspiratorial, but again, would it be surprised knowing what we saw at, for example, Standing Rock, what we saw at Occupy Wall Street, what we saw at all these different groups that are rising up against the banks, against certain forms of capitalism, against or capitalistic excess, predatory capitalism, these groups of protesters that protest against the establishment, how they were brutally crushed. And then you think that, maybe them wanting to use our data against us isn't such a far-fetched idea to begin with. Okay, now, going to the Senate, right? So it passed the House, then it went to the Senate, right? Now the Senate, Ron Wyden, Rand Paul had both come together on a Senate amendment to also make sure that you didn't spy, that the government does not spy on U.S. citizens, that does not have access to our data without a warrant. Well, what happened to that amendment? It was also shut down with the support of Democrats. They would not had enough votes to be able to pass this without the amendment, right? So they killed the amendment. They passed this anyway with Democratic support. So congratulations, both House and Senate Democrats. You just handed Trump unlimited powers to spy on U.S. citizens. How the hell is that resistance thing working out? Again, I thought Trump was a dangerous Russian asset. I thought he was pure evil incarnate. And yet here are Democrats working with Republicans to hand Donald Trump the most sophisticated domestic spying program that we've ever had. I thought he couldn't be trusted with anything. But Nancy Pelosi in the House and the corporate Democrats in the Senate, they couldn't wait to give him even more domestic spying powers. I mean, look, I wonder if you actually don't really mean this whole resistance thing, if it's just bullshit and you're using it to raise money so that you can win elections. In reality, a lot of these Democrats don't care about freedom. Look, for example, President Obama, we got rid of habeas corpus, right? Since President Bush, the Patriot Act has been reauthorized by the same people over and over and over again. Maybe Donald Trump isn't the only problem that we have. Maybe it's all these different members of Congress from both parties, both Democrats and Republicans, that are more than happy to get together when it involves in taking away your rights and your freedoms. Maybe that's the real problem here. And look, man, the Senate today, the worst news, the Senate today has passed it, and it will be signed, likely signed into law by President Trump. And Trump's like, oh, well, wait, didn't they use FISA to try to spy on me? He said out in a couple of tweets, but no. He decided, since talking to his friends, and look, if you're one of those people that are against the deep state, right? Well, this is Donald Trump saying, yeah, well, you know what? I'm going to sign this bill that is supported by the deep state that allows me to spy on American citizens, U.S. citizens without a warrant. Trump's not against the so-called deep state. No, he's more than happy to do it because he doesn't care about your rights. He doesn't care about your privacy. And he is all about getting himself into more power and using that power to do God knows what with. It's a sad day for the Fourth Amendment. Okay. I want to leave you with a more positive story now. And this is Larry Nassar. So let's go to that. So Larry Nassar is a former MSU coach, gymnast. Well, actually, he's a doctor. He was a gymnastics doctor who has been convicted on 7 first-degree felony sexual assault charges. Now, that stems, of course, from claims that he had molested during his time at those 2 jobs, molesting at least 100 different women, right? So, and these women were teenage girls at the time. So, this, of course, is absolutely heinous, and he did get convicted on first-degree felony sexual assault. So, again, that's great, and he is now he is has a plea deal with the court. Now, part of this plea deal, right, is to have to listen to victim impact statements on what his actions had done to so many of these girls that are now have grown up and are now women. Now, some of those impact statements, or I should say all of them, are actually incredibly difficult to hear if you've been paying attention to this, listening to their stories and how they were violated. It's incredibly difficult to listen to, especially since they were teenagers at the time, and that he was abusing his power, he was abusing his position to be able to get his rocks off, essentially. So this person, Larry Nassar, he's a straight up monster. Okay. Now, in this system, he deserves due process. Now, as I said, part of that plea deal that he received was to listen to his victims, but it turns out that he can't even do that. He recently wrote a 6-page, single-spaced letter complaining about his treatment by the court, about the deal that he agreed to. Oh, you know what? My mental health. I just can't sit here and listen to all these women tell me how much of a monster I am. He's having a bit of a hard problem, a bit of a hard time with that. You know what I say? Poor baby. Here, let me get out the world's tiniest violin and play it for you. That's what I think about that. Now, the judge in this case, I absolutely love her. Her name is Rosemary Aquilina. Now, she was not impressed by this letter, and she actually had a response to it. Let's take a look.
Hours that your hands collected. You spent thousands of hours perpetrating criminal sexual conduct on minors. Spending 4 or 5 days listening to them is significantly minor considering the hours of pleasure you had there spent in ruining their lives. None of this should come as a surprise to you. Judge Aquilina is seeking media attention over court protocol. Really? This is the people of the state of Michigan versus Larry Nassar, not Judge Aquilina. I'm doing my job. I try to do it well, unlike what you did. Because of my heart, I passed out twice the morning of federal sentencing. I'm sorry about that, sir. I wish you well. I don't know anything about that. Again, I didn't pay attention to what happened there because this is separate. Now, this is entertaining to me, I have to say. Aquilina said if I pass out, she'll have the EMTs revive me and then prop me up in the witness box. I suspect you've watched too much television. I have had persons, jurors have heart attacks, defendants go into seizures, all sorts of medical things. You can have your attorneys ask 911 for all the times I have called EMTs, stopped the trial and waited until a juror or a defendant or whomever was associated with the case was well. I would never do that to a human being regardless of what they did. So I don't know if it's your frustration at night or what's going on here, but I have to say, this isn't worth the paper it's written on.
Okay, so I realize that's a little bit difficult to hear. I'm going to clean that up and try to fix that in post when I put it up on YouTube later. And so I want to increase the sound. But basically what she said is that, look, you may find it harsh that you're here listening to these victims give their impact statements, but nothing is as harsh as what your victims endured for thousands of hours. Collectively, you spent thousands of hours perpetrating criminal sexual conduct on minors. Spending 4 or 5 days listening to them is significantly minor considering the hours of pleasure you've had at their expense and ruining their lives. Now, she also talked about how in this letter, he said, well, you know, hey, look, you're turning this into a media circus. This guy says that the judge was turning this into a media circus. That's not exactly true, right? As she explained, the media, since it's a public courtroom, the media can go wherever they want. And not only that, but that she was only doing this for her gain, which is crazy. She said that she wants these victims to be able to get their say. And since it's part of your plea deal to go and listen to these victims, you have to sit here and listen to it too. She also said that his claims about it affecting his himself mentally are absolutely ridiculous. That's not her words, it's my words. And that he claims that I'm having heart problems too. And that in his letter, he claims that, well, the EMTs were instructed to prop him up, to revive him and then prop him up, which is an absolutely ridiculous statement. So she goes through and she basically debunks all of the bullshit that he had written in that letter and finally said, this whole thing is not worth the paper that it's written on. So look, here's the thing, right? So this guy had the audacity to complain about hearing victim impact statements from the girls that he had molested as a coach, or I'm sorry, as a doctor for this gymnast team. This is the same gymnast team, and by the way, Michaela Maroney, if you guys remember her, she was also a victim. And so you've got all these different victims that are speaking out now and that are actually getting to face the person that had violated them in court for his sexual assaults. And he's like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I'm not interested in hearing it. Well, maybe you should have thought of that before you sexually assaulted all those girls. Look, Larry Nassar is a sick dude. I think it's obvious that he's got no empathy for anyone but himself. He doesn't care at all what he did to these girls. And he's just trying to get out of listening to them. But you know what? It's going to hear them. And I actually, and I'm a bad lib for saying this, but I hope it tortures him mentally. Because all those girls are carrying around the torture mentally that he gave to them. From all the things that he did to them over the years. All the ways that he took advantage to them, of them over the years. They have to live with that. And so maybe he should have to live with the knowledge that he had actually done all this stuff. And so, yeah, I think it's more than fair to have him listen to all these impact statements. And I hope it eats away at him every day. Okay. That's all I got time for, guys. Unfortunately. Thank you for watching. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. If you haven't already, please give us a like and a share. And please subscribe. I cannot overstate the importance of subscribing to this channel. It really helps us out. We have shows 5 days a week. We put up clips every day. So if you miss a story, you can go and you can watch it there. You can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation. That helps keep us independent and non-corporate sponsored. Helps keep the show going, especially with all the YouTube demonetization and further, ad problems. Because look, we can't rely on ad revenue anymore. We rely on you guys. So I want to give a thanks to all the patrons who support us. Patreon.com/TYTNation. Please consider supporting independent progressive media. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Same time, same place, right here, TYT Nation. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation.